He had billions in the bank, but an empty heart. I was just trying to make rent when our worlds collided. They said I wasn't his type, too dark, too ordinary. But now, he's down on one knee with a ring worth more than my childhood home. Hey, beautiful people, before I tell you how I went from struggling paycheck to having a billionaire beg for my hand in marriage, hit that subscribe button. My story might just change your life. I'm just a girl from the south side of Chicago who never thought she'd catch a second glance from anyone with serious money. 28 years old, working 2 jobs with an art degree collecting dust. My mama always told me I was destined for greatness, but standing in line at the food bank 3 years ago, I sure didn't feel it. Now, I wake up in a penthouse that overlooks the entire city. The man whose cologne costs more than my old monthly rent kisses me goodbye each morning. But this isn't about the material things. It's about how a man who could buy anything finally found something his money couldn't touch. Our worlds couldn't have been more different. While I was counting quarters for bus fare, he was counting jets in his private fleet. I grew up with community. He grew up with isolation. I had love but no money. He had money but no love. The universe had a wild sense of humor bringing us together. And trust me, no one's laughing harder than his old friends at the country club. Let me take you back to where it all began. I was working as an event coordinator assistant at this fancy hotel downtown. You know, the kind with marble floors so shiny you can see your reflection and doormen with white gloves. It wasn't my dream job, but it paid some bills while I tried to launch my small graphic design business on the side. Every morning, I'd squeeze onto the crowded train in my one decent black dress, praying the coffee stains weren't visible. That particular day was chaos. My boss had called in sick, and suddenly I was in charge of managing a tech innovation conference with CEOs flying in from around the world. I was running on 3 hours of sleep and my 4th cup of coffee when disaster struck. The automated registration system crashed. 500 irritated executives in designer suits were forming a line that snaked through the lobby, and I was the only one there with access codes. That's when he walked in. No entourage, no fanfare, just a tall figure in a simple charcoal suit that probably cost more than my annual rent. He wasn't what I expected a billionaire to look like. No flashy watch, no slicked back hair, just intense eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. I didn't recognize him at first, didn't realize he was Richard. Sorry, I promise not to use names. Didn't realize he was the tech mogul whose conference this actually was. While other executives were huffing and checking their watches, he stood silently observing the chaos. When it was finally his turn, instead of the attitude I expected, he simply asked, "How can I help?" I almost laughed in his face. What could this man who probably had people to tie his shoes possibly do to help me? But something made me hand him an iPad. If you could just check these people in while I restart the main system, that would be amazing. I expected hesitation or confusion. Instead, he nodded and turned to the next person in line with unexpected efficiency. For 2 hours, we worked side by side in the trenches of that registration disaster. He never mentioned who he was, never pulled rank, just rolled up his designer sleeves and helped. When the system finally came back online, my relief was so intense I actually leaned against a pillar and closed my eyes for a second. "You handled that impressively," he said, handing me back the iPad. "Most people would have crumbled." "Most people can't afford to crumble," I replied, not meaning to sound so blunt. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Not of who I was, but of something he'd forgotten existed. Realness. That night, as I was gathering my things to leave, the hotel manager approached with a business card. "He'd like you to call him about a job opportunity." My first instinct was skepticism. I'd heard enough stories about rich men and job opportunities. But the next day, curiosity got the better of me. I called the number, just to see. His assistant put me through immediately. He wanted me to coordinate his company's rebranding launch. The pay was 4 times my salary. I thought it was a joke until the contract arrived in my email an hour later. I told myself it was strictly professional, a chance to build my portfolio and maybe finally pay off some student loans. I had no idea that walking into his office the following Monday would change everything, not just my bank account, but the way I understood love, power, and my own worth in this world. Those first few weeks working for him were like stepping onto another planet. His corporate headquarters looked like something from a sci-fi movie, all glass and steel, and important people rushing around with purpose. I stuck out like a sunflower in a field of polished chrome. My colourful dresses and natural hair seemed to confuse the sea of grey suits, but I refused to dim my light just to blend in. The rebranding project wasn't just another corporate makeover. He wanted something authentic and human, words that made his marketing team squirm. During our first real meeting, I spoke my mind about their sterile approach. The room went silent. Nobody criticized the boss. But instead of being offended, he leaned forward, eyes focused entirely on me. Finally, he said, someone with an actual opinion. After that, our one-on-one meetings became longer. What started as 30-minute check-ins stretched into 2-hour conversations. We'd start talking about font choices and end up debating the ethics of technology or sharing childhood memories. I learned his mother had passed away when he was young, leaving him with a father who measured love in achievements. He learned about my grandmother, who raised me on stories of our ancestors who fought for every inch of dignity they had. "You have something I've never seen in my circles," he told me one evening as we shared takeout in his office after everyone had gone home. "You're completely yourself." "Being anyone else costs too much," I replied, shrugging. "I've never had the luxury of reinvention." It wasn't always smooth. Lord, we clashed. Our backgrounds created blind spots. When I mentioned my cousin's struggles with the criminal justice system, his solution was to hire better lawyers. When I explained systematic inequality, he countered with stories of his own hard work. But unlike most privileged people, he actually listened when I pushed back. He wasn't just hearing me. He was processing, reconsidering. The first time he touched me wasn't dramatic, just his hand briefly covering mine when I passed him a document. But that tiny contact sent electricity through me that had nothing to do with static, and everything to do with the growing awareness between us. I told myself it was inappropriate. He was my boss, my client. I couldn't afford to confuse professional opportunity with personal feelings. Then came the charity gala. His date had cancelled, and he casually asked if I'd fill in. "Just as colleagues," he clarified. I borrowed a dress from my cousin who modelled part-time, did my makeup with tutorials I'd looked up that afternoon, and tried to ignore the butterflies in my stomach. The moment he saw me step out of the taxi, something shifted in his expression. Gone was the polished businessman. For a split second, he was just a man, staring at a woman with undisguised wonder. "You look," he started, then shook his head as if words had failed him. That night, surrounded by the elite of the city, I watched him navigate his world with practiced ease. Yet he kept returning to my side, as if I were an anchor in a sea of superficial conversations. When a socialite made a backhanded comment about my exotic look, he smoothly replied that true beauty didn't follow trends. His hand found the small of my back, a silent statement of solidarity that didn't go unnoticed. Under the stars on the terrace later, our professional pretense finally cracked. "I've never met anyone like you," he said, voice low and vulnerable. "You make me question everything I thought I knew." "Is that a good thing?" I asked. His answer was a kiss that tasted like champagne and possibility, a kiss that crossed boundaries of class and culture, a kiss that scared me because I knew, even then, that this wasn't just about attraction. We were challenging each other's worlds in ways neither of us had anticipated. Dating a billionaire isn't all private jets and champagne. It's also whispers when you walk into a room, fake smiles from people who wonder what he sees in you, and the constant question in your own mind, do I really belong here? His world tried to swallow me whole from the moment our relationship went public. The first time we were photographed together, just leaving a restaurant downtown, the internet exploded. Gossip sites called me his exotic fling and diversity hire girlfriend. Complete strangers debated whether I was after his money or if he had some kind of jungle fever. I cried in the bathroom that night while he called his PR team, outraged. But these weren't battles he could fight with money or influence. These were the same battles Black women have faced forever when society decides our love is somehow less legitimate. His friends were worse than the media. At dinner parties, they'd talk around me like I wasn't there, or ask condescending questions about my community. One woman even suggested I should be grateful he'd rescued me. I set my champagne glass down and said, "Honey, the only thing I needed rescuing from is this conversation." He almost choked, trying not to laugh. His business partner was the most direct. "She's gorgeous, man, but let's be real. She's not exactly board meeting material," he overheard him say. "Have your fun, but think about your image." I wasn't supposed to know about that conversation, but secrets have a way of surfacing. When I confronted him about it, ready to walk away, something unexpected happened. Instead of minimizing it or making excuses, he looked genuinely ashamed. "I didn't defend you properly," he admitted. "I was caught off guard, but that's no excuse. I've spent my life letting these people define value, and they're wrong, about everything that matters." The next day, he announced a restructuring that effectively demoted his partner of 15 years. My side had concerns too. My best friends were skeptical, my cousins made jokes about selling out, and my aunt pulled me aside at Sunday dinner to remind me that, when the novelty wears off, those people close ranks. Only my grandmother saw beyond the money and status. "Watch how he treats the waiter, not just you," she advised when I brought him to meet her. "And see if he listens when you talk about the hard things." Everything came to a head 6 months in. His ex, a socialite from a family with old money and older prejudices, went to the press with claims that he had a pattern of slumming it with inappropriate women before returning to his kind. The same week, photos of me from college at a Black Lives Matter protest were leaked, with headlines questioning whether he was involved with a radical activist. Corporate sponsors threatened to pull out of deals. Board members called emergency meetings. His share prices took a hit. For the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for everything he'd built. "Maybe we should cool things down," I suggested one night, heartbreaking even as I said it. "Just until this blows over. I don't want to be what destroys your legacy." He was quiet for so long that I thought he agreed. Then he looked up with an intensity that took my breath away. "Do you know what my legacy is right now? Making money? That's it. Nothing that actually matters." He took my hands. "But loving you, being challenged by you, seeing the world through your eyes, that's changing me into someone who might actually deserve to leave a legacy." That night, against the advice of his entire team, he went on national television. No PR script, no careful messaging. Just raw honesty about confronting his own privilege, about how loving me had opened his eyes to inequalities he'd been blind to, and about how anyone who had a problem with us could take their business elsewhere. His stock dropped 12% the next day. 3 board members resigned, and when he came home, something fundamental had shifted. The power dynamic between us had finally equalized. He had chosen me over the approval of his world. Not because I needed rescuing, but because I had shown him a different kind of wealth, one made of integrity, authenticity, and courage. Love changes people, that's nothing new. But watching a man who once calculated every decision based on profit margins learn to measure life in moments of connection, that's something to witness. The transformation wasn't overnight. It came in small revelations, like watching ice melt drop by drop, until suddenly, there's a flowing stream where coldness used to be. He started asking questions instead of making statements. When we visited my neighborhood, he didn't just observe, he engaged. Sat on my cousin's porch for hours listening to stories. Showed up at my grandmother's church and stayed for the whole 3-hour service without checking his phone once. Started funding community centers without press releases, sitting in on meetings, not as a savior, but as a student. Meanwhile, I was changing too. I learned to move through his world without apologizing for taking up space. Realized that my perspective wasn't just valid, it was valuable. At galas and board meetings, I stopped trying to blend in and started speaking truth, surprising myself when powerful people actually listened. "You've ruined me," he told me one night, laughing as we lay tangled in sheets. I sat through a 2-hour presentation today, and all I could think was, what would she say about all this corporate doublespeak? "Good," I replied. "Someone needed to humanize you." The biggest shift wasn't what he gave up, but what he found. Joy in simple things, purpose beyond accumulation, the courage to be vulnerable. He'd built walls so high he'd forgotten there was a world outside them. I didn't tear them down, I just showed him how to open the gate. People noticed. His employees started bringing him their real problems, instead of just what they thought he wanted to hear. Old friends admitted they'd always found him intimidating, but now felt they knew the man behind the myth. New friends entered our lives, artists, activists, teachers, people who couldn't care less about his bank account, but valued his evolving mind and heart. "Before you," he confessed, "I was surrounded by people but completely alone. Now I'm actually living." Last month we flew to Jamaica to meet my extended family. I thought it was just a vacation, a chance for him to connect with my roots. On our last evening, he suggested a walk along the beach near my grandmother's childhood home. The sun was setting, painting everything gold. Without warning, he dropped to one knee in the sand. The ring was stunning but simple. He'd finally learned that flashy isn't always better. "You rebuilt me," he whispered, voice breaking. "Marry me not because I need you, but because I want to spend my life becoming worthy of you." Through tears, I said yes, not to his billions, but to his heart. If my story taught me anything, it's that your worth isn't defined by your bank account, but by the love you bring to the table. Like, comment, and share if you believe real love can transform even the most unlikely relationships. And subscribe for more stories that prove love conquers all barriers, even billions of them.